For 3 years, Damien believed she had betrayed him. But now, as rival assassins closing around a pregnant woman carrying a secret she had clearly been running from, one question cut through all his anger. What if Elena had not betrayed him at all? Damien did not move at first. He simply lifted 2 fingers. To anyone else, it looked like nothing. A small gesture from a man in an expensive black coat. But to his guards, it was an order. Lock the exits. Watch the men. Do not let the woman leave. Elena saw his guard spread across the terminal, and panic flashed through her eyes. For one painful second, Damien thought she might run from him straight into danger just to avoid standing in front of him again. That hurt him more than he wanted to admit. The woman who once slept safely against his chest now looked at him like he was another weapon pointed at her heart. She turned toward the glass doors. The 2 armed men moved faster. Damien stepped forward. The airport noise seemed to fade around him. Rolling suitcases, flight announcements, people laughing, children crying, all of it disappeared beneath the sound of his own controlled breathing. Elena reached the exit corridor. One of the men following her closed the distance. Then Damien's guard intercepted him with a shoulder block so subtle that no civilian noticed. The man stumbled, reached into his jacket, and instantly froze when he felt a gun press against his ribs. The second man changed direction. Damien was already there. He caught the man by the wrist before the gun came out, twisted once, and forced him against a marble wall with terrifying calm. No shouting, no chaos, just pure control. Elena stopped walking. Her face went white. For the first time in 3 years, Damien heard her voice in his memory, not in the present. You don't scare me, Damien. But now he did, and that knowledge poisoned him. His men dragged the attackers away through a service corridor before airport security could understand what had happened. The terminal continued moving, unaware that a silent Mafia execution had almost taken place beside Gate 7. Damien turned back to Elena. She was standing near a pillar, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the handle of a small suitcase. She looked thinner than he remembered. Stronger, too. Not the fragile girl he had abandoned, but a woman who had survived something brutal and learned not to beg. Damien approached her slowly, not because he feared her, because he feared what he might feel if he got too close. Elena took one step back. That single step snapped something inside him. 3 years ago, he had convinced himself that hatred was easier than grief. He told himself she had sold him out, that she had chosen her family over him, that she deserved exile. But now, standing in front of him with danger at her back and a child beneath her heart, she looked less like a traitor and more like a witness who had been running from the truth. Before Damien could speak, his phone buzzed. Isabella Varese had landed, his new fiancée, the woman he was supposed to marry in 72 hours to end a blood feud between 2 Mafia families. Her arrival was supposed to secure peace. Instead, Elena's return threatened to destroy it, because Isabella's father, Marco Varese, was not just a rival. He was the man who had benefited most from Elena's disappearance. Damien looked toward the arrival gate as Isabella walked through with her security team. She was elegant, beautiful, and cold in the way only Mafia royalty could be cold. Her eyes found Damien first. Then they shifted to Elena, then to Elena's stomach. A smile touched Isabella's lips. Not shock, recognition. Damien noticed it immediately. And in that moment, the airport became a battlefield without a single gunshot. Isabella crossed the terminal with graceful confidence, acting like a future queen arriving beside her king. Cameras from private security followed her. Her father's men watched from the balcony. Damien's guard stood ready. Elena remained frozen between past and present. Isabella leaned close to Damien, but her eyes stayed on Elena. She did not ask who Elena was. She already knew. That was the first crack in the lie. Damien's mind began connecting pieces with dangerous speed. The ambush shipment, the missing money, the dead man, Elena's family blamed, the Varese family gaining territory after the fallout, Elena vanishing, now assassins appearing the same day Isabella arrived. None of it felt random anymore. For 3 years, Damien believed she had betrayed him. But now, as rival assassins closing around a pregnant woman carrying a secret she had clearly been running from, one question cut through all his anger. What if Elena had not betrayed him at all? Damien did not move at first. He simply lifted 2 fingers. To anyone else, it looked like nothing. A small gesture from a man in an expensive black coat. But to his guards, it was an order. Lock the exits. Watch the men. Do not let the woman leave. Elena saw his guard spread across the terminal, and panic flashed through her eyes. For one painful second, Damien thought she might run from him straight into danger just to avoid standing in front of him again. That hurt him more than he wanted to admit. The woman who once slept safely against his chest now looked at him like he was another weapon pointed at her heart. She turned toward the glass doors. The two armed men moved faster. Damien stepped forward. The airport noise seemed to fade around him. Rolling suitcases, flight announcements, people laughing, children crying, all of it disappeared beneath the sound of his own controlled breathing. Elena reached the exit corridor. One of the men following her closed the distance. Then Damien's guard intercepted him with a shoulder block so subtle that no civilian noticed. The man stumbled, reached into his jacket, and instantly froze when he felt a gun press against his ribs. The second man changed direction. Damien was already there. He caught the man by the wrist before the gun came out, twisted once, and forced him against a marble wall with terrifying calm. No shouting, no chaos, just pure control. Elena stopped walking. Her face went white. For the first time in 3 years, Damien heard her voice in his memory, not in the present. "You don't scare me, Damien." But now he did, and that knowledge poisoned him. His men dragged the attackers away through a service corridor before airport security could understand what had happened. The terminal continued moving, unaware that a silent Mafia execution had almost taken place beside Gate 7. Damien turned back to Elena. She was standing near a pillar, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the handle of a small suitcase. She looked thinner than he remembered. Stronger, too. Not the fragile girl he had abandoned, but a woman who had survived something brutal and learned not to beg. Damien approached her slowly, not because he feared her, because he feared what he might feel if he got too close. Elena took one step back. That single step snapped something inside him. 3 years ago, he had convinced himself that hatred was easier than grief. He told himself she had sold him out, that she had chosen her family over him, that she deserved exile. But now, standing in front of him with danger at her back and a child beneath her heart, she looked less like a traitor and more like a witness who had been running from the truth. Before Damien could speak, his phone buzzed. Isabella Varese had landed, his new fiancée, the woman he was supposed to marry in 72 hours to end a blood feud between two Mafia families. Her arrival was supposed to secure peace. Instead, Elena's return threatened to destroy it, because Isabella's father, Marco Varese, was not just a rival. He was the man who had benefited most from Elena's disappearance. Damien looked toward the arrival gate as Isabella walked through with her security team. She was elegant, beautiful, and cold in the way only Mafia royalty could be cold. Her eyes found Damien first. Then they shifted to Elena, then to Elena's stomach. A smile touched Isabella's lips. Not shock, recognition. Damien noticed it immediately, and in that moment, the airport became a battlefield without a single gunshot. Isabella crossed the terminal with graceful confidence, acting like a future queen arriving beside her king. Cameras from private security followed her. Her father's men watched from the balcony. Damien's guard stood ready. Elena remained frozen between past and present. Isabella leaned close to Damien, but her eyes stayed on Elena. She did not ask who Elena was. She already knew. That was the first crack in the lie. Damien's mind began connecting pieces with dangerous speed. The ambush shipment, the missing money, the dead man, Elena's family blamed, the Varese family gaining territory after the fallout, Elena vanishing, now assassins appearing the same day Isabella arrived. None of it felt random anymore. Elena must have seen the realization forming in his eyes, because she whispered only one sentence before looking away. "You were never supposed to see me again." Those words did not sound like guilt. They sounded like a warning. Damien's chest tightened. A warning meant someone had forced her silence. A warning meant the betrayal he had built 3 years of hatred around might have been manufactured. A warning meant the child she carried could belong to him. Before he could force the truth from her, chaos erupted outside the terminal. A black SUV rammed into one of Damien's vehicles near the curb. Glass shattered. Civilians screamed. His guards drew weapons under their coats. Airport police shouted orders. Isabella's security formed a wall around her, but one of her men did not protect her. He aimed straight at Elena. Damien saw the gun rise. Time slowed. Elena turned too late. Damien crossed the space between them and pulled her behind him just as a first suppressed shot cracked through the air. The bullet tore through the sleeve of his coat and buried itself in the pillow where Elena's head had been seconds earlier. For the first time in years, Damien lost control. Not loudly, not emotionally, but completely. His eyes went black with murder. His men moved like shadows. Doors locked. Attackers were swallowed into side corridors. Someone screamed Isabella's name. Someone else yelled that the airport was under attack. But Damien heard only Elena's broken breath behind him. She clutched his arm, not because she forgave him, but because her body knew what her heart refused to accept. He was still the safest monster in the room. Damien turned his head slightly and saw tears in her eyes. Not from fear, from exhaustion, from carrying a truth alone for too long. Then Elena's knees weakened. Damien caught her before she fell. Her suitcase slipped open beside them. Inside were baby clothes, medical reports, a fake passport, and a sealed envelope marked with his name. Damien stared at the envelope. His name was written in Elena's handwriting. The same handwriting from old letters he had burned but somehow still remembered. He picked it up with blood on his fingers. Before he could open it, Isabella's voice cut through the panic from behind him. "Careful, Damien. Some truths are more dangerous than lies." He turned slowly. Isabella was smiling, and that smile told him she had known everything. Elena gripped his coat weakly and whispered the words that finally shattered the last wall inside him. "They killed my father because he found proof." Damien's face did not change, but every man who knew him understood. The Black King had just stopped waiting for answers. Now he was going to take them. Damien did not open the envelope at the airport. He did something worse. He placed it inside his coat, lifted Elena into his arms, and walked past Isabella as if she no longer existed. That insult was more dangerous than a public slap. That night, the Russo mansion became a war room. Screens displayed airport footage, financial transfers, shipping records, names, faces, routes, safe houses, and Varese family assets. Men who had not sat together in years stood under Damien's roof without argument. Nobody questioned why. They had all seen the look in his eyes. Elena woke in the guest wing just before midnight. A doctor had checked her. The baby was safe. Her body was exhausted, but stable. When she opened her eyes, Damien was standing by the window with his back turned, holding the silver chain she had taken off while the doctor examined her. For a moment, neither of them moved. All the violence outside the room felt distant, but the silence between them was more dangerous than the war waiting downstairs. Damien wanted to apologize, but men like him were not built for small apologies. Not after destroying a woman's life. Not after believing a lie so completely that he became the weapon used against her. He turned around. Elena looked at him with the same eyes that once loved him and now measured him like damage. He stepped closer, but she did not reach for him. That hurt. It should have, because this was the punishment he deserved. He had protected his empire with perfect strategy, but failed the one woman who needed his trust more than his power. Then the door opened. One of Damien's guards entered with a pale face. Marco Varese had made his move. He had kidnapped Elena's missing brother, and he was offering a trade. Elena and the envelope for her brother's life. The room changed instantly. Elena tried to sit up, panic cutting through her exhaustion. Damien saw the old fear return, the fear of losing another family member because powerful men treated human lives like bargaining chips. But this time, Damien did not allow fear to lead. He walked to the bed and placed the silver chain in her hand. Then he left the room without asking her permission to fight for her, because this time he would not make her beg to be believed. 2 hours later, Damien arrived at an abandoned aircraft hangar on the edge of the city. Rain hammered the roof. Floodlights cut through the darkness. Armed men stood on both sides of the open space like statues waiting for a funeral. Marco Varese stood in the center with Isabella beside him. Elena's brother was on his knees, bruised, bound, but alive. Damien entered alone. That was the first thing that unsettled them. No visible guards. No weapon in his hand. No panic. Just a black coat, a blood-stained sleeve, and the calm of a man who had already decided how the night would end. Marco smiled like an old king greeting a younger one. He thought Damien had come to negotiate. He thought love had weakened him. He thought Elena had become the leash around the Black King's throat. But Marco had misunderstood one thing. Damien Russo did not become less dangerous when someone touched what he loved. He became absolute. Marco demanded the envelope. Damien took it from his coat and held it up. For one brief second, every gun in the hangar seemed to breathe. Then Damien dropped the envelope into a puddle. Marco's smile faded. Damien had already copied everything. The evidence had been sent to every Russo captain, every dirty federal contact, every journalist on his payroll, and every enemy Marco had betrayed over 30 years. The Varese Empire was not about to be attacked. It was already collapsing. Phones began ringing across the hangar. One by one, Marco's men checked their screens. Accounts frozen. Warehouses raided. Loyal captains arrested. Ships seized. Safe houses exposed. Politicians turning. The empire Marco spent a lifetime building was being dismantled in real time, piece by piece, while Damien stood in front of him without raising his voice. Isabella's face changed first. Not fear. Fury. She stepped forward and finally dropped the mask. She admitted what Damien had already understood. She had known Elena was innocent. She had watched Damien destroy her. She had pushed the marriage alliance because she wanted the Russo throne beside him, and if Elena had remained, Damien would never have chosen anyone else. That confession was not spoken with regret. It was spoken with hatred, and that hatred revealed the ugliest truth. Elena had not only been framed to weaken a rival family. She had been erased because Isabella knew Damien loved her. Marco shouted for his men to kill Damien, but no one moved. Then the lights went out. For 3 seconds, the hangar disappeared into darkness. When the emergency lights flickered back on, Damien was no longer alone. Russo soldiers stood on the upper walkways, behind cargo containers, near exits, and above the steel beams. Every Varese gunman had a barrel aimed at his head. Damien had never come to negotiate. He had come to make Marco watch the end arrive. A shot rang out. Elena's brother fell sideways as one of Marco's desperate men fired. Damien moved instantly, killing the shooter before a second shot could follow. The hangar exploded into controlled violence. Guns flashed. Men screamed. Glass shattered. Rain blew through broken windows. The old alliance died beneath the sound of war. Marco tried to run. Isabella reached for a weapon, and then Elena appeared at the entrance. Damien turned, horror breaking through his control for the first time. She should not have been there, but Elena had spent 3 years running, hiding, surviving, and losing pieces of herself to other people's decisions. Tonight, she had not come to be protected like a secret. She had come to witness the truth being dragged into the light. Isabella saw her and aimed. Damien saw the gun. Elena saw it too. Everything slowed again. This time, Damien was too far away. Isabella fired. But Elena's brother, still bound and bleeding, threw himself into the path and took the shot in the shoulder. He collapsed, alive but screaming. That single moment broke the last discipline in Damien's men. The Varese line was crushed in minutes. Marco was dragged back to the center of the hangar, bleeding from the mouth, his expensive suit soaked in rain and defeat. Isabella was disarmed and forced to her knees, still staring at Elena with hatred. Damien did not look victorious. He looked ruined, because revenge could destroy enemies, but it could not undo 3 years of Elena sleeping in fear. It could not give her father back. It could not erase the moment he chose suspicion over love. Elena stood before him in the rain, shaking but unbroken, and for the first time since the airport, Damien lowered his eyes. The most feared Mafia boss in the city could face bullets, betrayal, and empires falling around him, but he could not face the woman he had failed. Behind them, Marco Varese was taken away to meet the consequences of every grave he had dug. Isabella screamed Damien's name as his men dragged her into the dark. But Damien never looked back. His empire had survived. His enemy had fallen. The truth had won. Yet the only verdict that mattered now was standing in front of him, carrying his child and deciding whether the monster who saved her tonight deserved even one more chance. By sunrise, the Varese Empire was no longer an empire. It was a crime scene. Warehouses were sealed. Ships were seized. Bank accounts were frozen. Men who had once toasted Marco Varese in private rooms were suddenly giving statements, surrendering documents, and pretending they had always been victims instead of partners. That was the thing about Mafia loyalty. It lasted only until fear found a stronger king. Damien Russo returned to his mansion with blood on his coat and silence in his chest. His men called the night of victory. His captain spoke of territory reclaimed, enemies crushed, and power restored. But Damien felt none of it, because revenge had given him everything except peace. Elena's brother survived the gunshot. The doctors said he would heal, but Elena did not leave his side for hours. She sat beside the hospital bed, holding his hand, her own body exhausted from stress, fear, and the weight of 3 years finally breaking open. Damien stood outside the room. Not inside. Outside. For the first time in his life, he understood that protection did not give him the right to enter. Saving Elena from bullets did not erase the bullets he had placed in her life with his disbelief. He had punished her without proof. He had let another family turn his love into a weapon. And worst of all, he had made Elena carry his child alone in a world that hunted her. When Elena finally stepped into the hallway, she found him standing there like a man waiting for sentencing. The old Damien would have demanded answers. He would have explained, justified, controlled the moment. This Damien said nothing. He simply handed her the full evidence file, every name, every transfer, every confession, every record proving her family's innocence. Her father's name was cleared. Her brother was safe. Marco Varese would never return to power. Isabella's mask had been torn from her face in front of both families, and the woman who once planned to become queen of the Russo Empire was now locked behind the same darkness she had created for Elena. But Elena did not smile. Justice had arrived too late to feel clean. She looked at Damien, and he saw the woman he had loved, the woman he had ruined, and the mother of his child all standing in the same broken silence. Her voice was calm when she finally spoke. Not soft, not angry, calm. And that calm frightened him more than rage ever could. She told him that the truth did not bring back the night she slept with a chair against the door. It did not bring back her father's voice. It did not erase the fear of every unknown car slowing outside her window. It did not heal the moment she realized the man she loved had become the man she had to hide from. Damien listened. Every word landed exactly where it was meant to. He did not interrupt. He did not defend himself, because there was no defense powerful enough to cover what he had done. Days passed. The city changed around them. News outlets called it the fall of a criminal dynasty. Politicians denied involvement. Rivals vanished from the streets. Russo soldiers took control of old Varese routes without firing another shot. But inside Damien's mansion, the real war was quieter. Elena moved into the East Wing only because Damien's enemies still existed in the shadows, and because a doctor insisted she needed protection until the baby was born. Damien gave her space. He doubled security without suffocating her. He sent meals but did not force company. He waited outside medical appointments unless she allowed him in. Every day, he became less like the man who owned the world and more like a man trying to earn the right to stand near one woman. The victory that Damien Russo had spent years chasing felt strangely hollow. The city whispered his name with fear once again. His enemies had fallen, the traitors had been exposed, and the empire he had built through blood and sacrifice stood stronger than ever. Marco Varese's criminal dynasty had collapsed overnight. His loyal men had either surrendered or disappeared. And Isabella, the woman whose lies had poisoned everything Damien loved, was finally paying for every manipulation she had carefully woven over the years. It should have felt like justice. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, Damien stood in the silent corridor of the private hospital, unable to move. For the first time in his life, revenge had left him with absolutely nothing. Elena's younger brother had survived the gunshot wound. The surgeons had managed to remove the bullet before it caused irreversible damage, and although recovery would take time, the doctors were optimistic that he would walk again. Those words should have brought relief. Yet Damien could only watch through the small glass window as Elena sat beside the hospital bed, gently holding her brother's hand. She hadn't left his side for hours. Her shoulders were slumped with exhaustion, dark circles rested beneath her swollen eyes, and strands of hair escaped the braids she had hurriedly tied together before rushing to the hospital. Every few minutes she whispered something only her unconscious brother could hear, brushing his hair back with trembling fingers as though reassuring herself that he was still alive. Damien remained outside. He didn't deserve to enter. Years ago, he would have walked into that room without hesitation. Every door opened for him. Every person moved aside. He believed power gave him the right to stand wherever he wished. Now he realized how wrong he had been. Protection did not erase betrayal. Saving Elena today could never erase the years he had spent destroying her yesterday. He had accused her without evidence. He had condemned her family without listening. He had allowed lies to become stronger than love. And while he had hunted imaginary enemies, Elena had carried their unborn child completely alone, terrified not only of the people chasing her, but also of the man she once believed would always protect her. The realization settled inside him like a blade, twisting deeper with every heartbeat. When the hospital room finally opened, Elena stepped into the hallway. She looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. 3 years of fear, heartbreak, loneliness, and survival had carved invisible scars across her soul. She stopped when she noticed Damien standing there. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them carried more weight than any argument they had ever shared. Damien slowly reached inside his coat and removed a thick black folder. Without saying a word, he placed it in her hands. Elena frowned before opening it. Inside were hundreds of pages. Bank records, phone interceptions, witness statements, security footage, financial transfers, signed confessions, every document carefully organized, every lie exposed, every truth uncovered. She turned each page slowly, her hands beginning to shake. Her father's business accounts had been manipulated. His signatures had been forged. The evidence that once condemned a family had been fabricated months before Damien had ever seen it. There were photographs proving secret meetings between Isabella and Marco Varese. There were recorded conversations discussing how to separate Damien from Elena. There were payments made to corrupt officials, bribes, false witnesses, everything. Every single accusation against the family had been manufactured. Her breathing became uneven. For years she had lived knowing she was innocent while the entire world believed otherwise. Now the truth sat inside her hands. Her father's name had finally been cleared. Her brother would survive. Marco Varese would never threaten another family again. Isabella's mask had been ripped away before everyone who once admired her. Justice had arrived. But justice delayed could never restore stolen years. A single tear rolled down Elena's cheek. Not because she was relieved, because she was mourning everything that had been taken from her. She slowly closed the file and looked up. Damien expected anger. He expected shouting. Perhaps even hatred. Instead, Elena looked at him with heartbreaking calm. That frightened him more than rage ever could. "When I slept," she said quietly, "I pushed a chair against the bedroom door every night." Damien remained silent. "I jumped every time a car slowed outside my apartment." Still he said nothing. "I stopped answering unknown phone numbers because I thought someone would find me." Her voice never rose. It remained steady, controlled, almost peaceful, which somehow made every word hurt even more. "I watched my father die believing the world thought he was a criminal." Damien lowered his eyes. "I hid your son before he was even born because I believed his own father would destroy our lives." The corridor became impossibly quiet. Doctors walked past. Nurses continued working. Families celebrated recoveries and mourned losses. Yet for Damien, the entire world had narrowed into those few sentences. Elena wasn't trying to punish him. She was simply telling him what his choices had cost. "The truth doesn't give me those years back," she whispered. "It doesn't erase my fear. It doesn't undo what happened." She looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. "I loved you more than I love myself." Her voice cracked for the first time. "And that was the biggest mistake of my life." Damien felt his chest tighten. He wanted to apologize, to explain. Sometimes strength was staying long enough to decide from a place of peace instead of fear. One evening, almost a year after the airport, Damien found Elena standing near the same silver chain she had once worn through exile. It rested in a small box beside Luca's crib. He told her he had arranged a home outside the city under her name only. No guards unless she wanted them. No conditions. No pressure. If she chose to leave, he would protect her from a distance and never use their son as a chain. Elena stared at him for a long time. That was the moment she understood he had finally changed. Not because he won her back, but because he was willing to lose her properly. The old Damien would have burned the city before letting her go. This Damien would burn himself before trapping her again. Elena did not run into his arms. Real wounds do not heal like fairy tales. Instead, she stepped closer and placed Luca gently in his arms. Damien looked down at his son, then back at her. Elena told him that forgiveness was not a door opening all at once. It was a hallway, long, painful, uncertain, and if he wanted to walk it, he would walk slowly. Damien nodded. For once, the Mafia king accepted terms he did not control. That night, the city lights burned beyond the mansion windows, but the Russo house felt different. Less like a fortress, more like a place where something damaged might learn how to live. Elena stood beside Damien as Lucas slept between them. She did not wear the silver chain again. Not yet, but she did not throw it away either. And that was enough. Because some love stories do not end with revenge, marriage, or a perfect kiss in the rain. Some end with a man who destroyed everything finally learning how to protect without possessing, and a woman strong enough to decide that surviving him was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of her power. So tell me, if you were Elena, would you forgive Damien Russo, or would you walk away forever?